So this is about the Torah being larger than life. To summarize it, it has three main points. Our first point is going to be comparing the Torah's outlook on life compared to other religions. So let's start with the introduction. And Elia, if you'd like to read on this page the introduction.
Naturally, we are interested in the material. Larger than life, eating, sleeping, and breathing Torah. Naturally, we are interested in the material pleasures that this world has to offer: a good meal, an entertaining show, and a comfortable bed. The question is, should we shun these desires? Does Judaism encourage us to transcend the physical in favor of something holier? Are we supposed to run away from material pleasure as much as possible?
Right. So what's your thoughts on that? Do you think we have to run away from the physical in order to be holier?
No, I mean, I
Meaning,
think
can one enjoy this world and be holy at the same time?
yes, we're definitely supposed to have like a bed to sleep in and stuff, but like, I mean, we're supposed to like enjoy what we have if we're lucky enough to have those things, I think.
Right. In other words, would be, does Judaism consider money a blessing or a curse? Because there are other religions, which we'll get into shortly, that say that one that has money shows on a bad side. They're involved in the wrong things. If you want to be connected with God, money has no place. Do you think that Judaism looks at money as a curse or as a blessing?
I think it's a blessing because, yeah, I mean, I don't think the goal of Judaism is to have money. Like, I think that like it's, if we are able to have, or like we can, or we do have money, we're having like some sort of income, we're blessed, and we need to give that to other people and share, and not just the money, but like give our time and stuff. But I don't know what God really says about it.
Right. No, very good. I think you got it right in the explanation that we don't look at it like a curse, of course. We look at it like a blessing when it's used properly. It's their career, and that becomes their main focus in life. Then we're subduing ourselves for the materialistic. That is incorrect. That's called the opposite extreme, where not only you're using the material world, you're turning it into the main focus. Both extremes, whether you're using the world as your main focus or you're completely avoiding the world and trying to not sleep in a bed, not have a house, not have money, both of those extremes are incorrect. Judaism views it as an ability to use it for the good reasons. And we're going to get into that in greater detail. Let's move on. Sheila, if you'd like to read this big idea of point number 1.
Our world, our bodies. Many religions favor the spirit over the body, the spiritual world over the material world, and the house of worship over the home. In Judaism, mitzvah concern the body, the material world, the home, and the workplace as much as the synagogue, the spirit, and the spiritual world.
Very good. So in Judaism, it's not that we only consider certain places holy. You have in other religions where they'll say the day that I have to go to church, the day that I have to go to my place of worship, that's a special day. The rest of my year, the rest of my life, the rest of my week, don't mix into my business. I'm in my private home, my private office. You have nothing to do with me. Judaism considers, number 1, the goal of life is to influence every aspect of your life. And let's go into that in greater detail. Elia, if you'd like to read over here, most religions, and then text 1. So these 2 first boxes.
Most religions emphasize the spirit. One of the most important scholars of Jewish law in the past century was Rabbi Dr. Joseph B. Soloveitchik. In his book Halachic Man, 1944, he describes the worldview and experiences of a person who is totally loyal to Jewish law, and how studying a religious Jew is different from studying religious people of other religions. Text 1, Rabbi Soloveitchik, Halachic Man. Chapter 3. It is difficult to analyze halachic a man's religious consciousness by applying the terms and traits that descriptive psychology has used to characterize the religious personality. The image that halachic man presents is singular, even strange. He is of a type that is unfamiliar to students of religion.
Very good. So here he's describing the differences between the way Jewish law views the ideal person to common ways, the way we view the ideal person. Let's pull up a slide over here. And this will be a question for Sheila. If you could read this, and then we'll have the question on the next slide.
Phil spends his life in the wilderness far from humanity, meditating on the greatness of God.
Okay, and then the next one.
Sarah Goldberg teaches math to second graders.
Okay, so now that we know both of their profession, comes the question. If you could read that question.
Who is holier?
What's your opinion? Who would you say is holier? Phil or Sarah?
Well, I think it depends on their motivation. I mean, if Sarah's really doing something because she really wants to teach kids, that's nice.
Right. No, very good. You're barking up the right tree. So the question really would be, let me ask you this. What is holiness? If you were to define holiness, close your eyes for a moment and think of it. What do you picture when you think of holiness? Give me some base words for holiness. Or Elia, feel free to chime in. What do you think of when you think of holiness?
Spiritual.
Right. Okay. What else? Some people will think of fluffy clouds, soft music, meditation, white angels. Maybe they'll think of a synagogue. So these are all ideas that we associate with holiness. So we might assume that this guy, Phil, is holy because he's so abstract, so distant from the world that has a lot of deceit, a lot of hatred, jealousy, war, famine, or other crimes. And therefore we would assume he's holier. So Judaism is revolutionary in the aspect of who it considers a good person, who is considered something special. Elia, if you'd like to read this question.
What is a halachic man? In what way is halachic man different from a religious Christian or Buddhist?
So halachic man, you could define person, a man that follows Jewish law, which means he brings to the way God wants him to behave. Would you say that he's just like a religious Christian and just like a religious Buddhist, just he has other beliefs, but overall they're both doing the same thing in their own way? Or are there essential differences between them? So let's read in the next text. Sheila, if you'd like to read over here, let us look, and text number 2, highlighted.
Where it says summing?
Right there.
Oh,
The
summing
highlighted
up.
word.
I'm sorry?
No, so starting from here.
Oh,
Let us
sorry.
look, where
Oh,
all the words.
Let us look at the underlying assumption of many other religions. William James, 1842 to 1910, a pioneer in the study of psychology in the United States, was a professor at Harvard University. In his classic book, The Varieties of Religious Experience, he summarizes the basic universal characteristics of religious life. Should I read the next one?
Yeah, and this is
William James, The Variety of Religious Experience, Chapter 20, summing up in the broadest possible way of the characteristics of the religious life as we have found them. It includes the following beliefs: that the visible world is part of a more spiritual universe from which it draws its chief significance, that union and harmonious relation with that higher universe is our true end.
Okay, so we're looking at a secular view, not the Jewish view. Now, this is a guy very famous. You might have studied him in school. He has a viewpoint where you can summarize it that number one, he says, point number 2 is that the more important role in life is to focus on that world. That spiritual realm is more important than this world. So therefore, according to him, religion is about focusing on the spiritual world rather than the physical. So in his eyes, there's a competition, or there's two extreme ways of living one's life. One person is working really hard to make money. The other guy is working really hard to not be associated with money, but to be associated with a world different than our physical world. So according to him, let's read this question. Aliyah, if you'd like to read this question and then answer it.
According to this source, which realm is, oh, okay, let me start over. According to this source, which realm is more important, the physical or the spiritual? And then do I read on?
So what would be your answer based on William James about his opinion of someone that's religious? What do you think is more important in his mind?
Spiritual.
Very good. So he defines clearly that a religious person is someone that's focusing on the spiritual. Of course, this is going to have major ramifications for the way religions teach their followers to live their lives. If you believe in this method, then how you're going to tell your followers to conduct their day-to-day life will be aligned with this philosophy, which we'll pull up the slide over here. In their mind, other religions will say that spiritual is the main world, and then you have the material world. Let's move on to the alternative. Or sorry, we're going to move on first for other examples. And Sheila, if you'd like to read examples from other religions of how they view this world.
One extreme example of this phenomenon is the fact that the Catholic priests are celibate. They are not allowed to marry. Many religions teach the central importance of a place of worship, focusing most on what occurs within a church, ashram, or mosque. They believe that what occurs in a house of worship connects a person to spirituality more than anything else.
Yes, very good. So if we look at our slides again, we're going to see here, for many of the Christians, marriage is prohibited. Where is God according to them? Clearly, God is not going to be in one's work or other places, but rather in a holy place, in a synagogue, not in a school, not in your workplace, not in a place you're going for pleasure, but in the spiritual realm. That's where God is. Everywhere else is against God. It's a battle of the good versus the evil. You probably heard this a lot. You have the Satan versus the good, and God is not found in anything that is not associated with the religion. According to that, let's ask this question. Elia, what would you say the answer to this question? And we're going to read it momentarily.
Can a Buddhist monk ever be rich?
No.
I don't think, I mean, like when I think of monk, like I see them in like their temple and they like have shaved head. I don't know, I'm not very educated on it, but I don't think that they like, they're so like they like have to be silent and stuff, and like I don't think they have the chance to like work for money as hard.
No, very good. That's a good guess. Let's read over here this text inside to Buddhists. If you could read that, Elia.
To Buddhists, money counts as a social convention. So, like other social conventions, Buddhist monks give it up. They can't buy or sell anything, get cash out of the bank, or even give or accept charitable donations. Jews have the highest rates of philanthropy because we believe in the power of money to make the world a better place. Why do you think monks seclude themselves from the rest of the world? Because they can't have money.
Right. So in their mind, money is evil and one should not associate. The holier you are, the more you'll distance yourself from money. Jews view one of the greatest mitzvahs, which a mitzvah means one of the greatest ways we can connect to God is by giving charity, by sharing the wealth that God has given us with others. Why do they view it negatively? And what could be positive about money? They view it negatively because their goal in life is specifically the spiritual. So the things that bring out the most physical, which is money, is considered bad, something you want to avoid like the devil. In our mind, the world is not an evil place. To make better. So money allows us to do even more good. Let's give an example here, just a nice building that was built. It's like an $18 million that was built in New Jersey. It's called the Lifetown Friendship Circle. It's a home or a place for children with special needs to learn basic skills. Let's just see a short clip on that.
A new multi-million-dollar educational center is set to open next week in New Jersey. It will teach life lessons to children and adults with special needs. CBS News' Ali Bauman gives us an exclusive first peek inside.
Like most parents do, Christy Verhag is always teaching her son life lessons.
Nice job, buddy.
But this Wayne, New Jersey mother admits some things are harder than others since her 9-year-old has autism.
It's tough to go to food stores with him sometimes, so this is a way that he can learn, how to buy things, how to purchase things.
Lifetown is taking a new approach on your traditional downtown. The nonprofit Friendship Circle built a replica of a small town inside a 53,000 square foot Livingston facility, meant to teach everyday skills to kids of all ages and abilities in a safe environment.
It doesn't matter how old you or small you are. You can do anything because you can learn how to grow up.
Teenagers and adults with special needs are also welcome.
It's all handicap accessible, and I could move around and play and have fun.
Participants start at the bank where they can take out real money. They can then use it at 15 different storefronts, including a movie theater, florist, and a salon. There are even magazines and waiting rooms and bumps in the road.
Real life skills. They can experience all kinds of different things.
The complex costs $18.5 million to build, most of it coming from donations and partnerships, while real medical professionals voluntarily run the dentist and doctor offices. Some kids have taken on roles as police officers and cashiers.
Our programs are based on teen and adult volunteers. We have over 1,000 students can learn and experience life skills, job training, all different types of safety in this environment, and then practice in the real world.
Downtown is usually where you can find it all. This one making no exception, just adding an educational component. Ali Bauman, CBS 2 News.
The space will be open to families and public programs, but you have to register.
So what do we see from this? This is just an example of how one can use money for good things, things that are helping one another. A mitzvah to love your fellow like yourself, to assist the stranger, to assist those that are misfortunate for one reason or another. Here we see an example where money is a blessing. It can be used for good causes. Let's read the next quote. Okay. And Sheila, if you'd like to read text number 3.
Oh. From the 3rd century CE, there developed a trend in Egypt and Syria, which saw some Christians decide to live the life of solitary hermit as ascetic Jew or aesthetic, one who deprives himself of physical pleasures. They did this because they thought that without any material or worldly distractions, they would achieve a greater understanding of and closeness to God.
Right. So their philosophy is based on what we're going to read in this paragraph. And Eliyav, if you'd like to read over here, this paragraph.
God is removed, humans are evil. Their ascetic practices stem from a core belief about God's presence in the world and human nature. Most religions believe that 1, God is not part of the material world, and 2, human nature is essentially evil. Therefore, religious people who want to connect with God must focus on their souls and the world of the spirit. To be good, they are told that they must resist their natural impulses and replace them with otherworldly virtues. That one cannot be their true selves and virtuous at the same time. They must therefore sacrifice parts of themselves and choose virtue. Practically, this means 1, spending a lot of time in prayer and contemplation as opposed to spending time eating and drinking. 2, viewing the house of worship as the main arena of one's religious life. Does Judaism agree with these ideas? Keep going.
Yeah,
People imagine that. Oh, huh?
Yeah.
Sorry. People imagine that since God is not physical, therefore he must be in heaven. but the heavens and all things spiritual are just as much his creation as the earth.
Right. So this is the erroneous approach according to Judaism. What we read over here, that God is removed, that humans are evil, that is the incorrect approach according to Judaism. Some say, meaning the non-Jews, some religions will say that God is spiritual, and therefore everything physical is the opposite of God. We say the same God that created the physical created the spiritual. God is neither physical nor spiritual. God is not up in the heavens. If you fly up in the heavens as far as you want, you're not going to find God. God created spiritual things, things that we cannot touch, see, or contact with our five senses. And God created the physical, which we can. Both of them have a purpose and a reason. One is not better than the other. I'll give you another example of people that have other views, not the Jewish view. We'll have here a video of this fellow. Wait 1 second. Here.
Successful modern life involves lots of technology, constantly being connected with other people, working very hard for as much money as possible, and doing what we're told. So it may come as a surprise that some of the best advice about modern life comes from an unemployed writer who lived alone in the woods and refused to pay his taxes. Henry David Thoreau reminds us about the importance of simplicity, authenticity, and downright disobedience. He was born in 1817 in Concord, an unassuming town west of Boston. His father was a pencil maker, and his mother took in boarders. He attended Harvard College in 1833, yet he rejected the ordinary career paths like law, medicine, or the church. Then Thoreau struck up a remarkable friendship with the American transcendentalist philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson. Transcendentalism is a philosophy that emphasizes the importance of the spiritual over the material when it comes to leading a fulfilling life. Emerson and his transcendentalism had a huge influence on Thoreau. Moreover, Emerson helped Thoreau find a place where...
So the question is Judaism a transcendental religion? Meaning, do we believe in transcendentalism, meaning that we have to transcend this world, or do we believe that the goal is engaging the material world? And the answer is unequivocally that Judaism wants us to engage in the world, not in a way that we serve it, but that it serves us. Everything that God created, just like he created the spiritual for a reason, the physical was created for a reason too. And it's our job to use it for something good. So we wouldn't agree with this fellow that the ultimate goal in life is to live out in the forest and avoid all contact with human life and the rest of the world. Here we'll have some of the Jewish sources where it proves to us that Judaism's version of holiness is the unconventional version of holiness. Sheila, if you'd like to read over here, unconventional holiness, and the next text.
We may sell a synagogue and likewise other holy items, even a Torah scroll, for the needs of the Torah students or to marry off orphans with their revenue.
So this is shocking that the Jewish law says you can even sell a synagogue or the holiest item, a Torah scroll, in order to marry off someone, which other religions say marriage is a sin. They would never say to sell a church in order to get married. Better not get married at all. Judaism says to marry off someone or to teach people the Torah. What good is it if you have a Torah that's not being taught? Because we view all holiness as a method to allow us to live the lives appropriately in this world. And Sheila, if you could just read the few lines before, indeed, the part that I highlighted here.
Indeed, Judaism's view of holiness is radically different than most other religions. Think about it. We are not even allowed to rest an elbow on a sitter or use a sitter to prop open a window. Indeed, there's a full section of laws in the Shulchan Aruch regarding holy objects, how it is forbidden to destroy them, sell them, or even use them for an unholy purpose. But at the end of the list of these holy items, there's one notable exception.
So it's not like we don't respect our books. We highly respect them above and beyond everything. However, we realize that its purpose is to assist us with living proper lives. And Elia, if you'd like to read over here, this highlighted till the bottom of the page.
What does that show us about the priorities of Judaism? The following source seems to argue that in a certain way, the material world is actually more important than the spiritual world. Text 5. One moment of repentance and good deeds in this world is better than all life in the world to come. Let's take a step back and see how Jewish law relates to matters that seem to be non-spiritual.
Very good. So here we have in this quote, it says, how important is this world that it's better one moment of doing something good in this world than everything that you could have in the spiritual world? Can you imagine another religion saying this? A monk saying that it's better what one can accomplish with one moment of doing good deeds, connecting with God by following his commandments, helping one another is better than anything you can imagine in the spiritual world? They say, no, I'm trying to avoid this world as much as possible. We say, while you're in this world, use this world to the utmost possible to serve God, to make it a better place. Let's read a nice story here that brings out this point of not just looking on our own growth of spirituality, but understanding what's the ultimate message that God wanted from us. So Sheila, if you'd like to read this story.
It was the night of Yom Kippur, the holiest time of the year. All the Jews were gathered in the synagogue, anxiously awaiting their Rebbe's arrival to begin the prayer services. But the Rebbe was nowhere to be seen. The congregation waited to begin the service. The minutes ticked by. Where was their beloved leader? Just outside the village, Rabbi Shneir Zalman, the first Chabad Rebbe, walked out into the woods with a sack on his back to chop down wood. He gathered logs and carried them to the rundown little house of an impoverished widow who had just given birth. The Rebbe put the wood into the fireplace and stroked the fire until the new mother, her newborn, and 5 small children began to feel its warmth. Then the Rebbe headed to the synagogue for Kol Nidra. In Judaism, saving a life is so important that chopping wood and creating a fire normally forbidden on the holy day like Yom Kippur are permitted. No task was beneath this great Torah scholar as he created a blazing fire in the fireplace, unpacked the food and clothes from the sack, lovingly fed the children, and left the woman with many kind and caring words.
So what do we see here? He was willing to give up the holiest day, and the rabbi could have sent anybody else. He could have said, listen, I have a lot of schleppers here that don't know how to pray anyways. Let them go ahead and do it. He said, I'm missing the point if that's what I do. If I know about a woman that is struggling, she just gave birth and no one's there to help her, I'm going to go myself on the holiest day. Of course, it's permitted to chop wood and light a fire when you're saving a person, which includes dealing with a woman that just gave birth. So he didn't transgress the holiday. On the contrary, he celebrated the holiday in a way that one is supposed to, and it's there to change your outlook on how you appreciate all the gifts and opportunities that you're given in this world and how to behave appropriately. He said, if I get a chance now to connect with God by helping this person, and I avoid it by thinking I'm connecting with God by acting all spiritual in the synagogue and praying and trying to meditate, I missed the point. So the above story, I'll read the last 3 lines here, is a classic example of how a great tzaddik viewed his chance to attain holiness, not by going to the synagogue, but by leaving the synagogue on the holiest day of the year to tend to another's needs. Here we have another quote. Let's just pull over here just a few slides that will bring out this point.
Successful modern life involves lots of technology.
So the question I would ask is, what's Judaism's view? Eliyah, which one of these do you think should go into the sentence? Is what a necessary evil? I'll give you a hint. It's a little bit of a trick question.
Yeah, I don't really get it.
Meaning, are any of these things a necessary evil? A lot of other religions will say yes. What does Judaism say?
Food, right? Or
No, so
sexuality?
the answer is that none of the above.
Oh.
In Judaism, none of these are essentially or a necessary evil. it all depends how one uses these items. You can use money, food, and sexuality for evil, but you can also use it for great things. One can use money to give charity, can use food to feed the poor, or to give himself life so he can live a functional, successful life serving God. And sexuality is a commandment. The first commandment in the Torah is to get married. However, one can use it in a sinful way when it's done inappropriately with the wrong person. But when done properly, these items are all commandments from God. They're all ways of doing something positive. It's not a necessary evil. So whereas other religions will view the physical, like these examples, bad, we don't view them as a necessary evil. In other words, we would say, are human beings essentially evil or good? Sheila, what's your thought on that?
I would think for the most part, people want to do good to various degrees.
Correct. So Judaism views exactly like you said. We view it that deep down, we want to do the right thing. We are born selfish, and it's our job to peel away the outer layer that's selfish and narcissistic and full of ego. Like a baby when they're born is very self-centered. He wants to just do what feels good for him. And it's our job not to change it to something that we're not, or to agree that who we are is always going to be bad, but to say deep down inside, God gave us a good soul, and it's our job. He intentionally created the world this way, that we should peel away our own narcissistic, egotistical behavior in order to better the world and make it a good place. So essentially, we're good. We have to work on bringing that out. Until we do that, we could be very evil. But our job is to bring out the true good that's ultimately deep down inside of us. And like we were speaking before, Judaism views books as an extremely holy item. We kiss books when we finish them, holy books, like prayer books. We kiss them when we finish. We hug the Torah, we dance with it. And yet we understand that all the holiness that the books give us is just there in order to make us a better person when it comes to opportunities of working on our character. So in Judaism, a mother raising her children, or lighting the Shabbat candles, these small actions, having guests over, are all serving God. Serving God is not only when a person avoids having children and goes far away, doesn't deal with others' needs, they just try to leave their body, but doing the needs of their body for the purpose of serving God, that is the ultimate service of God. So in Judaism's view, Elia, if you could read this question.
Where's the best place to be? I'm assuming that's like heaven versus like earth.
Yep.
Well, they're both God's creation, so either one, right?
So the answer is that wherever we are, that's the ultimate place. Meaning, like you read before, I'm going to pull this back up, one moment of repentance and good deeds in this world, meaning when a person is in this world, that is the primary place where they need to be. It would be foolish for us to waste our time in this world trying to work on getting to a spiritual place which we're not there. When we're in the spiritual world, that's the best place for us to be. When we're in the physical world, that is the place God wants us to be. That's where we can fulfill our mission. It's not against God. That is doing what God wants. God wants us to make this world a better place. Let's give, this is an interesting story, similar to the one we read, but it happened with another rabbi, just to bring out the point of true service of God. So that story brings out a beautiful point. If our souls were in heaven before we came down to earth, why would God bring us into earth just so we could go back to heaven? That would be a little bit of a waste of a trip. The reason why he sent us to this world is because as much as we were in heaven before, in this world we can reach higher than heaven by working on ourselves. When one sees the world as a tool that he can use in order to serve God, he becomes greater than he was in heaven. Like the rabbi in the story, he was reaching higher than heaven by helping another, not just by transcending his physical being. So can one have it all? Can you keep a regular material life and be holy as well? The answer is, if you use your material life as a method to be a holy person, then yes. If one uses the gifts that were given to him in order to serve God better, absolutely. Let's read this other quote over here. Text number 6. Sheila, if you'd like to read.
Religion emphasizes the importance of being good and of being right. It condemns those who are bad and those who are wrong. Those who practice a religion strive to be perfect. If they fail, they may be condemned. And if they succeed, they may become intolerant of others. We serve him instead of seeking to be served by him. The opportunity to serve provides an escape from narcissism as taking us beyond ourselves. The object now focuses on the deed rather than on the person. Is it good? Is it right? That is the question. My own goodness and righteousness is not the issue. Even when I'm not all good, I can do that which is truly good. And when you do a mitzvah, it is as good regardless of who you are or what you are. The gratitude for this opportunity brings real joy to life. Hence, serve God with joy, because serving is the only means to joy. When you are devoted to serving God, you naturally want others to do the same, for only together can we fulfill his plan completely. Cooperation, not religious competition. Equally significant is the fact that we are born to these mitzvahs. God created us for this mission. It is therefore our trust self that fulfills the mitzvah, not a denial of self.
Very good. So he really summarizes the idea of Judaism viewing the world as a place where one can just do the act, and that is the purpose for us being here. It's not about destroying the self, but our true self is when one can serve God with joy, and that's the ultimate way that one can achieve joy. Let's read the summary for part 1, and then we'll move on to part 2 of this class. Elia, if you'd like to read summary.
We have covered the first big idea. Many religions favor the spirit over the body and the spiritual world over the material world, and the house of worship over the home. In Judaism, mitzvot concern the body, the material world, the home, and the workplace as much as the synagogue, the spirit, and the spiritual world. In the following section, we will explore the second big idea.
Okay, so the second big idea, Sheila, if you'd like to read point number 2.
Mitzvot are not a particular set of exercises. They are a way of life.
Very good. So besides for what we mentioned earlier, that we view the physical world as the reason we're here, it's not just that mitzvot a way for our life consistently. Let's view over here on the slide. We have thought, speech, and action. How many of the commandments, if we had to guess, how many of the 613 mitzvot the commandments that God gave us, how many of them govern what we think and feel, and how many govern what we do? Meaning, how many fall into the category of transcendental ideas and how many fall into the category of action? And the answer is, shockingly, from 613, only 15 are associated with thoughts and feelings of what someone should feel, how they should feel it. And the other 598, almost 600, are actions. Do this, don't do that. This tells us a lot about what is it that really Judaism is about. It's not so much just philosophical ideas, but it's a way of life that's telling us day in and day out how a person should behave. It's a comprehensive way of life. Let's read that over here inside. Sheila, if you'd like to read, comprehensive way of life.
Oops, hold on, okay. As stated previously, mitzvot are very much connected with our everyday physical life. This leads us to an important point about mitzvot in general. They are not just something we do, rather they are our entire life. The following verses declare that mitzvot are a comprehensive path for life and are relevant everywhere and at all times.
Very good. So it's something that is involved with every aspect of our life. And Eliyahu, if you'd like to read, this is a quote from Proverbs, from King Solomon. He gives us a quote on the Torah. So text number 7.
Did you ask me to read?
Yeah, if you'd like to
Sorry,
read that.
my mom started talking.
Yeah, no worries, no worries.
Text 7. My son, keep your father's commandment. Do not forsake your mother's teaching. Tie them over your heart always. Bind them around your throat. When you walk, it will lead you. When you lie down, it will watch over you. And when you are awake, it will talk with you. For the commandment is a lamp, the Torah is a light, and the way to life is to rebuke the disciples.
Disciplines. So you have this quote is telling us that the Torah is not something that we learn once every week or once a year, but rather it's something that we should have with us constantly because it is our life. It is what's going to give us guidance in every step and every aspect of our life. And if you'd like to read Eliyahu, the last 2 lines here.
Torah and mitzvot accompany a person on the path of life, whether walking, lying down to sleep, or when awake.
Right. There was once an anti-Semite that went to a king and said, Jewish law is so pathetic. He says it gives you details on everything. It tells you how you should behave in the bathroom, how you should get dressed, how you should, when you're allowed to cut your nails and when you're allowed to cut your hair, when you're not allowed to. He's like, come on, who's really interested in such intricate details? Doesn't make sense. And the king responded, he said, actually, if that's the case, I'm pretty impressed because the fact that it is so detailed shows me that it comes from a God and he's telling us in every aspect of our life how we should be living. Let's read some examples of how much Judaism is teaching us in our every day-to-day life, how one should behave. Sheila, if you'd like to read all this highlighted text.
One way of thinking about this is by looking at different sections of the Shulchan Aruch, the foundational and authoritative halakhic law work. Think of it as something akin to the American Constitution. It is a work from which we determine every Jewish law and its application. The Shulchan Aruch begins by teaching us the proper halakha way of waking up in the morning and getting dressed. Should I read the next one?
Yeah.
One should strengthen himself like a lion to get up in the morning to serve his creator. One should be particular to put on the garment so that he should wear it inside out. One should put the right shoe on first and not fasten it. Then after that, put on the left one and fasten it and return to fasten the right one.
So this is actually a mistake on the translation. It should say to put on the garment so that he should not
wear it inside out.
Not inside out. But what do we see from here? That it's giving us laws on how we should wake up. You have to wake up, getting up with strength like a lion, how one should get dressed, what type of order one should be putting on his clothing. It's because Jewish law is a comprehensive way of living life in every aspect. It's not just random items that we have at certain points, but rather throughout our life, God says there's so much that you need to do. Let me guide you through in every step of your life how one should be behaving. In Jewish law, let me pull up over here an example. You should be able to see this on the screen here. So we have here, I'm going to go through on the screen. You'll see these are 4 categories of the Shulchan Aruch, which is code of Jewish law. The first one is Orach Chaim, which speaks about the day-to-day life. Yoreh De'ah, which has a lot of the laws of kosher. Even HaEzer, a lot of the laws between marriage, divorce, and Choshe Mishpat, which are laws of monetary issues. Now here we're going to have some examples of these laws. When to visit the sick. When is someone required to return a lost item? When are you allowed to ask for money to be returned? Meaning if I lent you money, how often and when can I ask you? Who is allowed to circumcise? How to lead the prayer services? These are all examples of laws that are in one of those 4 books. So of course you have the different categories. Each one of these questions fall into one of those categories, but it just shows us how far detailed these items go. When a man is allowed to get divorced, he cannot get divorced at any time. There's certain rules, how he has to go about it. What are the legal claims or situations that allow him to get a divorce, and so on. So these are just some examples that we have. The point being that Judaism is in every aspect of our life. Let's see over here another example. And Elia, if you'd like to read this highlighted page.
There are pages and pages in the Shulchan Aruch that teach the proper Jewish ways to do anything, like get dressed, walk, sit, or eat. It does not cover only personal behavior. There are many halachot about interpersonal conduct, as well as laws that govern the ins and outs of business damages and other monetary matters. Many of these things are not intuitively part of religious law. Most of these religions do not even address them, but in Jewish law, they take up a prominent place. There's a pretty standard example of what it's like to find in the section of Shulchan Aruch that deals with the laws of damages. If one throws their dish from on top of their roof and there were pillows and blankets underneath so that if the dish were to fall, it would not break, but someone went ahead and removed the pillows and blankets so that when the dishes struck the ground, they broke, the party who removed the pillows and blankets would be responsible to pay damages. Interesting.
Right. So this is an example of a law that you would typically not find in Christianity or Islam. This is more of a law that has to do with the local government. However, Judaism has sections, tractates in the Talmud and sections in the Shulchan Aruch discussing laws like these because it does involve itself in every aspect of our life. Why is that so? So Sheila, if you'd like to read over here, the bodily correspondence. The Talmud gives an interesting observation. Yeah, so start from the precise.
The precise number of mitzvah reflects the all-encompassing nature of the halakhic system as depicted in the slide. This idea is sourced in the Talmud. Rabbi Simlay taught there were 613 mitzvahs stated to Moses in the Torah, 365 prohibitions corresponding to the number of days in the solar year, and 248 positive mitzvah corresponding to the number of the person's limbs.
Right. Okay.
All these numbers are symbolic, or is there something deeper?
So are they just symbolic, or is there something deeper? And the answer is, let's pull up on the slides. It was intentional that that's the way they are, that there is 365 prohibitions corresponding to the 365 days of the year, since the Torah has something regarding every day of our life, not just Yom Kippur or Shabbat or Pesach, but on every day of our life, the Torah has something to share. So we see 365 prohibitions for every day of the year. 248 positive is not just random, but we have, for males at least, 248 limbs of the body. because every limb in our body has a way that it's going to connect to God. Meaning, it's not that God created us with limbs, and then later on he said, you know what? I have a list of commandments. Let me see what I could give you. It was the opposite. God had commandments, and he said, okay, I need all these commandments to be filled. Let me create humans with the limbs that can fulfill these commandments. So if we look at it, this text over here, Eliah, if you'd like to read, this really is emphasized in this book. And then you'll read the text 11. Let's start with that.
This idea is emphasized by the Sefer Charedim, the medieval book that lists the examples of all of the mitzvot of the Torah instead of organizing the book based on order that the mitzvot appear in the Torah. Sefer Charedim is organized around which part of the body we use to perform the mitzvah. Here's some examples of the chapters and opening lines of Sefer Charedim. Do I keep reading them?
Yeah, so let's read this text 11, yeah.
Chapter 1, positive commandments that are dependent on the heart. A person must a person must believe there's a God who created all beings from absolute nothingness and that he conducts them and rules over them as his will. Chapter 4, positive commandments that are dependent upon the eyes. To look at someone's tzitzit, as the verses states, and you shall see them and remember all of the commandments. Chapter 5, positive commandments that are dependent upon the ears. A person should listen to words of the Torah from all of their teachers. And the verse states, and it will be, if you will listen to these laws and you shall perform them. If one does not listen to the commandments, then one will not learn them and perform them. Chapter 6, positive commandments that are dependent upon the mouth of the trachea. To honor one's parents with words, to speak to them gently and nicely, as the verse states, honor your father and mother. And then chapter 14, positive commandments and prohibitions that are dependent upon the nose. It is prohibited to smell the incense of idolatry. As the verse states, you shall not be connected to it at all. Therefore, one does not recite a blessing on the fragrances, even if one enjoys them.
So we see from here that he lists commandments for every one of the limbs, because ultimately Judaism has something to say about all our limbs. Every aspect of our life has a way that we can connect to God through it, or that we can disconnect, and our way of following God is by not doing what God says we shouldn't do. Okay, Sheila, if you'd like to read this part and then text 12.
Not only does Jewish law deal with the body, but the body is so central that it's an organizing principle of the mitzvah. How is this different from the way other religions view the body? Rabbi Soloveitchik sums up this emphasis on the body and how it surrounds a Jew's entire life.
Okay, and yeah, continue.
That dualism so prevalent in other religions, which distinguishes between the man who stands before God in a temple and the man driving a hard bargain with his fellow in the marketplace, is totally foreign to the halakha. Halakhic man does not compartmentalize reality. This is the domain of eternal life, and this is the domain of temporal life. On the contrary, he brings down God into the midst of time. How many noblemen bowed down before the cross in a spirit of object submission and self-denial, confessed their sins with scolding tears and bitter cries, and in the very same breath, as soon as they left the dim precincts of the cathedral, ordered that the innocent people be cruelly slain. We have here a manifestation of a deep fissure in one's psychic identity. The halakha, however, rejects this personality split, such as spiritual schizophrenia. The halakha declares that the man stands before God not only in a synagogue, but also in the public domain, in his house, while on a journey, while lying down and rising up. The halakha, the Judaism that is faithful to itself, however, which brings the divine presence into the midst of empirical reality, does not center around the synagogue or study hall. These are minor sanctuaries. The true sanctuary is a sphere of our daily mundane activities, for it is there that the realization of the Laka takes place.
Very good. So to summarize, he's saying a powerful point. If one goes to synagogue and is very holy in synagogue, and then he goes to work and acts like a pig, excuse me for using that term, but he acts like someone inappropriate. He steals, he lies, he cheats, he's dishonest. That is missing the point. You cannot be spiritual just in the synagogue and think that it's okay, business is business and synagogue is synagogue. Other religions, like he says here, you had in the past people that would confess their sins and then kill those that were under their rule without a problem. Judaism views it as whatever you're doing in the synagogue is there to help you throughout your life behave appropriately. So let's summarize point number 2, Elia.
Summary. We have covered the second big idea. Mitzvot are not a particular set of exercises. They are a way of life. In the following section, we will explore the third and final big idea that will explain why halacha is so.
Very good. So now we went to explain in the second section how Jewish law involves itself in every aspect of life. And now we're going to explain why. Sheila, if you'd like to read point number 3.
God is everywhere. Really? God is everywhere and created everything. He wants us to bring holiness into everything.
Right. Okay, so let's read over here the first source. Elia, if you'd like to read from here.
If God is everywhere, we're always in his presence. So Judaism is all-encompassing. But why? What is the meaning of this? Why would Jewish law be all-encompassing and deal with issues that seem very mundane and non-spiritual? The answer is already in the Shulchan Aruch itself. In the laws of how to get dressed, it states, one should not say to oneself, I am now in an inner room. Who can see me? For God's glory fills the whole earth.
So this is, he says, why does one have to act appropriately and dress modestly even when he's by himself? He shouldn't say, who can see me? Because God ultimately can be everywhere. And therefore he has to act accordingly, even when he doesn't see another human. So this is the reason why Judaism involves itself with every aspect of our life, because God is in every aspect of our life. Okay, Sheila, if you'd like to read this point, which we had this mentioned before regarding another aspect, but it comes up over here as well.
7 days before Yom Kippur, they removed the high priest from his house to the chamber of the counselors, and they set up another priest to take his place, lest something should occur to him to disqualify him from being able to worship. Rabbi Judah said, they even prepare another wife for him in case his wife should die. Oh my God.
But what do we see from here? That the highest priest, the holiest man on the holiest day of the year had to be married, because we don't disassociate holiness with marriage. We said you need to first be living a life of holiness in all areas, which includes being married in order to serve in the temple. So God cares about every act in every situation, whether it's in the bedroom, street, or in the synagogue, because he's in our bedroom just as much as he's in the synagogue. And Elia, if you'd like to read this last paragraph.
In Judaism, marriage, love, and intimacy are not just for earthly people. Well, the priests engage in more spiritual matters, but actually they're a requirement and a great mitzvah. In fact, the very first mitzvah in the Torah is to be fruitful and multiply, to have children.
Right, very good. So if we look at our slide over here, these are both serving God. Whether you're praying on the left or whether you're working, it's also serving God, because the same God is present in both locations. God is not only spiritual. God created the spiritual, created the physical, and he interacts with every aspect of our life. And it's not just that God is in the synagogue. God is in your home and in your business and in your life just the same. His goal is that you should have godliness in every aspect of your life. So what is considered holy? We have over here a man laying tefillin, and we have food. The food is just as holy in the sense that we have to use it as well as a form of how we serve God. Let's read the next source where we have this text inside from the Jewish sources. Sheila, if you'd like to read.
When God created the world, he desired to have a dwelling in the lower realms as he does in the upper realms.
So the same God that wanted holiness wanted a physical world that's holy. And Elia, if you'd like to read over here, holiness is not what you think.
To go one step further, let us look at Maimonides' Mishneh Torah, the first organized comprehensive book of Jewish law. He divided all of Jewish law into 14 categories. The fifth section is entitled the Book of Holiness. What would you expect to find in that chapter? Let's take a look at what Maimonides actually included. Do I read it?
Yeah, and read this.
In the fifth book, which is the Book of Holiness, it contains 3 sets of halachot, and that is the law and this is their order: the laws of forbidden sexual acts, the laws of forbidden foods, and the laws of ritual slaughter.
Right, which is shocking. You would think the Book of Holiness would talk about meditation, transcendentalism. It would talk about how to avoid your body, how to avoid eating. What he discusses is forbidden relations and food. How is that holiness? So let's read that. And Elia, if you'd like to continue reading.
Maimonides is following the cues of the parts of the Torah which associate the laws of eating and sexuality with the term kedusha. Is this through the following these halachot that are one? Oh, wait, sorry. It is through the following these halachot that one becomes holy. Why? Do you know what is a Nazarite? Oh, do you know what a Nazarite is?
Do you know what a Nazarite is?
Yes.
Right. So Nazarite is one that abstains from drinking wine. He wants to go away from taking from worldly pleasures or things that might cause him to sin. What is the laws regarding a Nazarite? So Sheila, if you'd like to read text number 17.
Shmuel said, oops, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's good. We could still hear you.
Yeah, but I can't see it.
Oh.
There it is. I'm sorry. I lost it. Okay. Shmuel said, whoever sits in observance of a fast is called a sinner, as it is inappropriate to take unnecessary suffering upon oneself. The Nazarite sinned by distress he caused himself when he abstained from wine in accordance with the term of his vow. Think about it. If this Nazarite who distressed himself by abstaining only from wine is nevertheless called a sinner and requires atonement, then with regard to one who distresses himself by abstaining from each and every matter of food and drink when he fasts, all the more he should be considered a sinner.
So we see over here that a Nazarite, as much as it's nice that he's trying to control his temptation, but because ultimately he abstains from something in the world, he's considered a sinner to some degree. So too, someone that abstains himself constantly from fasting and not partaking in the world is also a sinner because they're not understanding what true holiness is. The greatest sanctification of the body is not by negating it, by destroying it or denying it, but it is by engaging the body in a holy manner. So it's not by escaping, but rather it's by redirecting the body to bring holiness into the body. That is the ultimate goal. That's what we're trying to do, because the body is just as God created as the soul is. God created the body as well. Don't let the body control you, because the body needs to be directed properly. However, don't destroy the body, because that's also a part of God's plan. So the one that is trying to elevate himself, and therefore he makes a promise not to partake in wine, it has good intentions, and it is a commandment that if one made such a promise, they should fulfill it. However, it's to be avoided unless absolutely necessary. One should learn how to live in the world and yet be able to still serve God properly. Okay, so Elia, if you'd like to read over here. The
The
sin.
sin of the Nazir is that he took a vow to abstain from all wine. God wants us to drink wine. How do we know this? Can you think of how many situations in Judaism call for wine? On the other hand, halacha also gives us an example of when and how wine is not allowed. If we look at Jewish values, what do we see in the ultimate goal? To drink wine or to not drink wine? The answer is we should drink wine in a holy way.
Right? Because we drink wine for Kiddush, we drink wine for Havdalah, we drink it on Purim, we drink it whenever we have a holiday. However, there's times when wine is not allowed. Certain wines are not kosher, certain times are fast days, or certain times are too saintly in order to start getting a little bit frivolous with drinking wine and getting drunk, or one shouldn't overdo it and become too drunk. So it's about harnessing and using the world for the proper reason. And here we have a quote where let's actually read it. So Sheila, if you'd like to read this part, this is a fundamental.
For instance, okay.
Yeah.
Oops. Okay. For instance, if one eats fatty meat and drinks aromatic wine, not out of physical desire, but in order to broaden his mind for the service of God and for his Torah, or in order to fulfill the commandment to enjoy Shabbat and the festivals, especially in the second case, his eating and drinking are not merely the means to a spiritual end, as in the previous example, but are a mitzvah in themselves, for we are joined to enjoy Shabbat and festivals by eating meat and drinking wine. When one eats and drinks with this intention, he takes the vitality he receives from physical food and turns it into holiness.
Very good. So this is the ultimate way that one should be seeing the pleasures of the world. So let's use this chart for a moment, and you have wine. Other religions will say wine is prohibited. Muslims strictly prohibit alcohol consumption. Judaism says wine is used for Jewish ceremonies. We do it Kiddush, Havdalah, at a wedding ceremony, the Pesach Seder. However, a Nazir, which is distancing himself from wine, we say has to ask forgiveness for not drinking wine. Intimacy, another example. Other religions will say Catholic priests, they must remain celibate. Judaism says the holiest person, the Kohen Gadol, must be married. And for everyone, there's a commandment to get married. So too, we have with money. Buddhist monks, they're not allowed to handle money. By Judaism, we say giving charity is an important part of Jewish life. We have here a story from the Talmud regarding the body and the soul. Aliyah, if you'd like to read this story.
Okay. Once there was a king who had a beautiful orchard with splendid figs. He appointed 2 watchmen for his orchard. One watchman was lame and the other was blind. One day, the lame man said to the blind man, "I see beautiful figs in the orchard. Come, I will ride on your shoulders and will take them and eat them." So the lame man rode on the shoulders of the blind man, and they took the fruits and ate them. Sometime later, the owner of the orchard came and inquired of them, "Where are those beautiful figs?" The lame man replied, "Have I feet to walk with?" The blind man replied, "Have I eyes to see with?" What did the king do? He placed the lame watchman on the shoulders of the blind watchman and judged them together. The body needs the soul and the soul needs the body. We can't serve God without either one.
So this story brings out that the body doesn't oppose the soul. On the contrary, the body serves as a vehicle to express the soul's needs. And therefore, we get to choose what is it that our body and soul as a team want to do. Either they could do crimes or they can do great things. And as Maimonides brings in this text, how one can do everything that's pleasurable in this world, but the question is, why are they doing it? Sheila, if you'd like to read. Thus,
whoever walks in such a path all his days will be serving God constantly, even in the midst of his business dealings, even during intercourse, for his intent in all matters is to fulfill his needs so that his body be whole to serve God, even when he sleeps. If he retires with the intention that his mind and body rest, lest he take ill and be unable to serve God because he is sick, then his sleep is service to God. On this matter, our sages have directed and said, "And all your deeds shall be for the sake of heaven." This is what Solomon declared in his wisdom. Know him in all your ways, and he will straighten your path.
Right. So we see here, he says you can do all these things, but if it's for the purpose of serving God, that's ultimately why God created these items. And let's read over here the last quote from Rabbi Soloveitchik. Elia, if you'd like to read from Indeed.
Indeed, the purpose of it all is to bring that godly awareness that every part of the body, as Rabbi Soloveitchik argues. Halakha aims to sanctify man's body, refine the bestial aspect of human life with all their lust and drives, and raise them to a level of divine service. But this refining process does not take place in a crucible of denial and deprivation. It occurs by stamping the natural aspects of human existence with direction and purposefulness. I don't know how to pronounce. Combining the beast in man with his driving image purifies and sanctifies the body. This union is accomplished by imposing the yoke of the halachic commandments on the body. The purpose of the halachic imperative is not to label man's sensual body as impure and thus to reject it, just to purify it and draw it closer to God.
Very good. So to sum up what he said in one sentence, Judaism wants us to make our bodies holy, but not through depriving ourselves, like other religions do, try to destroy the body, but instead we use our natural urges to serve God. So God created a body and a soul. Each one has its own challenges, its own easy points, and the goal is to make both of them serve God. So we'll use food for an example. If one has let's pull it up over here, the slide, to make it a little tempting in case anyone's hungry. Wait. We're gonna skip this video. That one as well. But when one has a desire for food, they can ask themselves, is this my body just craving to satisfy its desire? Or is my soul hungry to do something better so I should be able to serve God? Meaning my soul wants to use the world as a way to nourish itself so it can continue serving God. So the desire for food is not a negative urge on its own. Rather, we use eating as a chance to make our bodies more holy. Before putting anything into our mouth, we pause. It's common that we say a blessing before. The blessing, unlike popular belief, is that we're thanking God for the food. The blessing is not thanking. We thank God after the meal. Before the meal, we're acknowledging the source of the food, that it comes from God. God created it, and that gives us the permission to use it. God gave it to us so we can benefit from it. By making a blessing before, we're showing I'm not eating this food because I'm tempted by it. I'm eating this food because it's God's creation, and God gave me food so I could sustain myself, so I can be a proper human being and do what's necessary in my life. Let's read the summary. Sheila, if you'd like to read.
We have covered the third and final big idea. God is everywhere and created everything. He wants us to bring holiness into everything.
Very good. So a takeaway would be that anything physical in the world can be used as a means to connect to God. So if we use money or food, all these items are opportunities to use it for positive things. Also, being mindful of what we put into our mouth. If we make a blessing every time before we eat something, that's declaring that this is God's creation and he's giving us the ability to use it. So I'm hydrating myself to better serve him. Let's read over here okay, 1 second. I'll pull up over here the final points and we'll read it over here. So Elia, if you'd like to read these points, the key points. Or
all
how
of them?
about, yeah, so there's 2 pages, so you'll read all of these,
okay.
7, and then Sheila will read the next 7.
Oh, okay. Other religions favor the spirit over the body, spiritual over material. Okay, wait, should I just read them all, or should I
Or if you want, after a few, share what you took away from that or what it enhanced in your understanding.
Most of their practices concern the soul and the spiritual, like prayer and meditation. The body and the material world were viewed largely as a necessary evil. But in Judaism, the body and the material world, like God made us in this world, so this isn't like we're not supposed to like reach somewhere else. It's like where we are is where we're supposed to be. As a result, some of the bodily behaviors are frowned upon, such as marriage. Also, as a result, their practices mainly center around the house of worship. But then we learn that God is everywhere, so you shouldn't act differently when you're by yourself because he's just as much in your room or in your house as he is in shul. Judaism is concerned with both the body and soul. Most mitzvot and halachot concern the body.
Exactly. We said, look at the numbers of mitzvot, where 598 concern action, because we're not about distancing ourselves from the spiritual. We're about enhancing the material world, making it a place where God feels just as he feels in the spiritual world, he should feel in the physical world. He should feel at home. Okay, Sheila, if you'd like to read the last points.
Marriage is considered a great mitzvah. There are mitzvahs concerning every place. There are mitzvahs that take place at home and the workplace that mitzvahs are not an exercise, they're an entire way of life. God is everywhere and created everything. So it is logical that he has something to say about everywhere and everything. Mitzvahs do not ignore the body and the material. They elevate the body and the material to become holy.
Very good. So these are the 3 points we mentioned. Point number 1, that we do not disencourage engagement with the body. We look at the body as part of the mission. Judaism involves every aspect of our life, not just in certain places and certain times. And the reason is because it's all ultimately God is present everywhere. I'll finish off just with a short story. The Chabad Rebbe once went to visit a summer camp that he founded. And when he was touring the camp, it was around visiting day when parents come. So some of the waiters, in a, I guess, humorous way, were trying to generate tips from the parents for the waiters. So they put up a sign, "Money is the root of evil. Leave your evil with us." Meaning to say it in a cute way that you should leave a tip for your waiters of your children. So the Rebbe saw the sign and he asked them to take it down. And he said, this is not a Jewish approach. Judaism does not quote money as evil. Judaism looks at money as a great gift that can be used for evil, but of course can be used for great mitzvot. It can be used for something amazing. Like we see the greatest sages were physical laborers. We have Hillel the Elder, Akiva, Rav Huna. These were sages in the Talmud that each one had another job, whether it was a water carrier or a wood chopper. The Romans at the time considered anyone that was intelligent should not do labor. Labor was for the slaves, for the low-class people. They viewed the world as distracting one from going into the philosophical ideas. Judaism views the world just as important as the mind and the soul. With that, we'll conclude. It was a pleasure joining you both today, and we're looking forward for next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye.
Bye.